Hey, what's happening, everybody? I'm Larry Roberts, and this is another episode of the Readily Random Podcast.
Hey, you could be larger than life, bigger than the world, living out the hopes and dreams.
Today, I've got a guest that is phenomenal, and I'm moving this episode up. That's how excited I am to talk to this gentleman. Normally, when you do an episode with me, it's 8-9 weeks before I release it, but this one's kind of time sensitive because Marco Perazzo is the coach and black belt in BJJ, or for those that aren't in the know, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. And his fighter fought last weekend on the UFC card. So we're definitely going to be talking about that. So with no further ado, Professor Marco Perazzo?
Well, I would have liked a little more charisma out of you, maybe some more compliments towards me, but hey, we got to work with what we got to work with.
I'll improve it as we go along.
Thank you.
So, Marco, man, I appreciate you coming on. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, what you have in store for us on this particular episode, what you do day to day in your martial arts endeavors, and then we'll just take it from there.
Awesome. I see Batman in the background there. For those of you that are listening to us, there's a giant cutout of Batman. And I just want to know which Batman is it?
That's the Batman from the video game. What's that video?
Arkham Asylum?
Yes, it's the Arkham Asylum Batman. Yeah,
I'm not a nerd. I didn't know it right away.
I know you didn't just go Arkham Asylum. Oh, I was just playing.
So, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man.
I'm completely readily random in my life, so this is great. So, I am a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like you said earlier. I got involved in the martial arts at what I thought was somebody was a little bit too old to get involved in the martial arts. I was about 22 years old back at UFC #1, which I think they're celebrating the 25th anniversary of the UFC. So 25 years ago. And I got involved through a childhood friend, and, it brought me to this now where I own one mixed martial arts academy and I'm partners in a second academy. And, it's kind of brought me to a stage and a station in my life that I never kind of suspected I would be in, or be at. I had somebody ask me, he's like, what was it like cornering at the UFC? There's going, jumping right.
Yeah, let's
into
just get to it, man. Let's just get to it.
And I said, as a kid, like we've all watched football, right? And we know, oh man, it would be awesome to be on that sideline, but very few of us make it, right?
Yeah.
And I never had aspirations of getting in the cage because back then it just seemed like this was for the Gracies, and the Gracies fought and they beat everybody up. So it's kind of, and I didn't have very many physicals, I wasn't an athlete in high school and I didn't play any sports and I was, overweight and all that other stuff. So, but, the feeling, this is the second time I've cornered in the UFC and it's like a bit surreal, I'm like, wow, I've seen this on TV and here I am, and I'm pretty, and not in like a biblical or a religious sense, but I'm pretty blessed to be here,
Sure.
Through the relationships and the hard work and, the trust that Tim has put in me.
No, that's phenomenal. I'm a huge fan of the UFC. I've been there since day one as well. I was already involved in martial arts. We've kind of had this discussion on Unstructured with Mr. Eric Hunley. But I still...
And we'll expect a check for the plug, Eric. So,
Tell him. I'm too fat to do anything, but you can choke him out. So... So I remember distinctly watching the first UFC, and I remember the build-up to it, advertisements in Black Belt Magazine, come win $50,000 if you think your martial art is the best. And at the time, I was studying Kenpo, and I thought Kenpo was the best. And finally, I think it was, I don't know, what was it, UFC 4, I think is where we first saw Keith Hackney, and he was a Kenpo stylist, and he pounded out a sumo wrestler, Manny Yarborough, who rest in peace. He passed away on us. But
he also beat up Joe-san.
He did beat up Joe-san. That's right. That's the first time we ever saw the groin area massaged.
Massaged and pounded into smithereens.
Yes. And
the crazy side stories. Do you know Joe-san's in jail?
Yes.
Yeah, for some sort of rape that he had committed years ago, and then he had gotten arrested, and they took his DNA, and now he's in jail. I guess being in the Austin Powers movies didn't help him.
No, it, it definitely did not. I don't remember who he played. I know who he played, but I can't remember what his character
Random
name
Task.
was.
He played Random
Random
Task.
Task. There you go. Man, your knowledge of what do you call it? Hip-hop culture, not hip-hop culture, but
Pop culture.
there you go, pop
Right.
culture. I'm just the host. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, your knowledge of pop culture is pretty impressive.
Thank you.
You probably have a black belt there too.
I would hope so, but I haven't been awarded it yet, so I'm just waiting for them to kind of give it to me. But going back to what you were saying, like
Yeah.
Keith Hackney was the first Kempo guy, I guess. You know, and I don't know how. I guess my real question to people that were putting it on, like, how legit were these guys that they were bringing in to fight Hoist? Were they the top of the top, or were they just dudes that were like, yeah, I do Kempo and I'm a badass and I'll fight? Yeah, you know.
You know, I have to lean towards option B there. You know, they're just guys that had high rank, or they had kickboxing matches, or they had some sort of experience, and they were tough enough to get in this cage, because just getting in a cage is super intimidating. I mean, it's just
It's super intimidating coaching outside of it.
yeah, right, exactly.
You know.
And I've coached Pete Spratt, who was a UFC vet. I worked his corner for the time that he fought Rich Clemente, and he beat
Okay.
Rich way back in the day at Reality Combat. And I was supposed to fight that night, but some things took place and it didn't happen. So I ended up just cornering, and just being there cage side. You know, it was amazing. It was just amazing. And I've been to several UFCs. Back, I think it was 22 and 24. I was at the Tito Frank fight, and back then security was so lax that we were able to get in the octagon. So
So let's talk about how far the UFC has come. Right?
yes, that's
You know,
my point. Exactly.
we were given, so I've cornered Bellator. I've cornered a lot of the local events here in Philadelphia, Philadelphia area. And, you know, when people say the UFC is the best of the best, they are
Mhm.
clearly like number one, like by a mile.
Sure.
Right. I no offense to Bellator and all these other organizations, but I think a lot of those guys would readily admit it as well. So you got into the cage. I was given credentials that as I'm walking in the back of the arena, it was like Minority Report. My picture would pop up as I'm passing these sensors, and it would let the security know if I was allowed to have access to that area or
Oh my
not.
gosh.
Yeah. It was pretty. They're like, oh yeah, don't worry about it. You know, you might see your picture pop up, and I go, what's this? I go, yeah, you know, my credentials say no floor access. Like I couldn't go in and watch the fights on the floor. I had to be in the green room after.
Oh my
and all that
gosh.
other stuff. Yeah. So they talk, when you put billions of dollars behind
Yeah.
an organization like they did, they are super tight with what they're doing.
That's amazing, because that show that Frank and Tito did, UFC, we'll call it 24. It might have been 22. It probably had 1,000 people at it. And it was literally at one of the lowest points in UFC history. The fight was phenomenal, not the fight, but the actual show that went on that night was one of the lowest points in the sport's history. And
Well, I mean, they were in so much flux. You know, well, I guess rest in peace, John McCain. But John McCain at the time was
Yes.
very anti MMA, because you know, what the MMA people were saying at the time was that he was in boxing's back pocket, and that's why, you know, and boxing was afraid of MMA. But you couldn't find it on pay-per-view, or it was very difficult.
yeah,
and,
it was gone. You had to have satellite to watch it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
the Fertitas, I don't know when the Fertitas came in and bought it. but
33.
so not too soon, not too far after. that.
Right. Yeah. And 33 was such a disaster of a show. It was their very first show, and it was a sleeper. Every fight to decision. Nobody fought. Everybody fought not to lose, because it was under the new ownership, and they didn't want to, you know, come out under that new ownership with a loss right out of the gate. It was nuts. And I had a big party that night, as a matter of fact, and we were all just like, oh my God. It was horrible.
Yeah, I don't even I can't even remember who was on that card. You know, there's like it's so many UFCs now. It's crazy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, what are we at? 2 something?
It's well over 200. I think 228 is coming up, or
Yeah,
maybe
next
229.
weekend.
Yeah,
So next weekend is the Dallas card, I think, if I remember right, with Tyron Woodley and
Darren Till.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting fight, but the rest of the card doesn't impress me enough to drive down and watch it.
well, Darren Till just looks like a massive human being for 170 pounds. Man, he's a giant.
Yeah, he is 100%. He's huge, and he cuts a lot of weight though, and that's one
He's
of
got
the
to
biggest.
make weight this time. Is the thing.
Exactly, because I mean, if you know, normally, and I know you know this, with undercard fights, meaning not championship fights, you have that flexibility of missing by 1 pound. But with championship bouts in the UFC, you have to make weight, and it has to
Yes.
be spot on. There is no leniency whatsoever. So if he misses it, he's going to get docked on his purse. And if the fight goes on, which I'm sure it probably will, he won't be fighting for the title.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, and there's a lot of arguments, jumping around in the community about guys missing weight on purpose to give themselves a bit of an advantage. I don't know. It doesn't seem to make sense to me, because I think with the way the UFC runs, and it's important to them that title fights continue to be title fights. Right. And they're building Till and Woodley up, and they want it to be a title fight. So him missing weight, I don't think bodes well for his future career.
No, I don't think so either. I've heard the same thing, but from the same perspective, you lose half your purse. So do you want to go home with 50% of what you were going to get paid in the first place? Probably
Dude,
not.
I've seen some checks, man. They're like 50% of some of these purses. You're not going home with much.
Yeah, exactly. Back when Pete fought in it, and I know he wouldn't mind, he's made this public numerous times, he was fighting for 4-4, 8-8, and then 12-12 was his last fight. And basically that's 4 to show, and if you win, you get 4 more. So, and then 8-8, and so on and so forth. But if you miss half that's half your salary for your job. I mean, think of it that way.
Right. And you're talking about a time where, what was Pete doing? Was he a professional martial artist, or did he have a job on top of that?
Oh, he was straight martial artist.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was lucky enough to be able to kind of train all the time. Because
Yeah.
you have a bunch of guys even today, like, we'll talk about Tim Williams, who I cornered recently.
Yeah.
But he's a professional carpenter. He builds scaffolding on high rises, like he doesn't,
Wow.
he's as professional of an athlete as you can be while continuing to hold down a full-time job.
And that's one of the complaints with the sport is there are, especially on the undercard, the pay scale on the undercard and even the prelims, it's not something that can sustain a family or sustain, think of it as minimum wage, if not less, for a fighter, in all honesty.
Man, and you saw Tim's fight, and I saw his, his check,
Right.
and I'm like, I'm not taking what he took for what he just got paid.
Right.
So these guys are fighting because they're passionate about it.
Exactly.
Right. Because they want to be champions, and this is the sport they've chosen. So they know all this. This isn't, it's not a aha or gotcha moment when they get that check. But when you take a step back and look, like, man, just like anything else, at the low level, even at the UFC, you're not making much money, and you're risking an awful lot.
Yeah, and a lot of people that aren't familiar with the sport or even familiar with the backside, a lot of people watch the show now and watch the sport now, but they're still relatively uneducated to what goes on behind the scenes, as far as you have to pay your trainers, you have to pay your dietitian, you have to pay for your medical expenses, you have to pay for a variety of other things. I don't even know anymore. Those were the top 3 back when I was as involved as I could have been.
Yeah, so like for us, he's got to cover our flights out to Nebraska.
Yeah.
He's got to get us a hotel. Do you know what I'm saying? And he's not that we expect it, but he'll cover our meals and that kind of thing. So the way I eat, it gets expensive. I'm used to like filet mignon and stuff. So
There ain't no buffets in Nebraska.
no. Speaking of Nebraska, people have been asking me what it's like. Some of the most beautiful, down to earth people ever.
Really?
I just don't know where they are. Like walking through Lincoln, Nebraska, it felt like a scene out of a zombie movie. I was waiting for them to come out of it. Like you would look for blocks. You wouldn't see a human being. It was
That's wild.
It was very odd. And I was like, why did they pick Lincoln for this UFC? But when we get to the event, I bet you there was 5,000-6,000 people there, and there's, the arena we spoke to somebody at the hotel. They said they drove 3 hours to come to the fight. So that was cool.
That back when I'll keep referencing 22 and 24 when we drove to Lake Charles, Louisiana, from Sherman, Texas, and it's a good 4.5, 5 hour drive to Lake Charles. We didn't care if it's there. That's as close as it's going to get, because it wasn't even allowed in Texas.
And the fans of MMA are just that passionate.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
I mean, like they love MMA and they love MMA fighters, and it's one of the few sports where a fan has very easy access to who he looks up to.
Oh yeah.
It's not like, how am I going to meet Tom Brady? That's just not going to happen.
Yeah. It's never going to happen. I mean, it might, but it's going to be a rare occurrence.
100%. But you can go to American Top Team, or you could go to Rufus Sport, look in. It's like, oh, look, there's the UFC 170-pound champ working out next to my jiu-jitsu class for beginners.
Yep.
Yeah, you know.
You know, it's funny. I don't know if you heard it. I don't know if you listened to the Joe Rogan podcast, but Cowboy Cerrone was on there, Donald Cerrone, and he let loose with some.
He- the old puppy mill.
Yeah, the puppy mill. You know, for $150, $150, you can walk in there and you can train with the pro fighters.
You know, I'm gonna have to take his word for it. You know, I've never been out there, but
Yeah,
you know, like Greg Jackson. I don't know much about Winklejohn, but you know, he was intimating that, you know, when they came together, that's
Right.
when it started to fall apart. But I mean, it's like anything, man. Like people catch on, fighters leave. You're not going to be the best for as good as the Patriots are. They don't win every Super Bowl, you know. So, and I did read some interesting stuff that Winklejohn said. I don't know if you heard his retort where he said that Cerrone is one of the most narcissistic people he's ever met. Doesn't come to the gym to help people. I didn't say that.
Right,
Winklejohn
right.
said that.
We're
In case I ever
repeating
run
this.
into Cerrone somewhere, you know. But there's two sides to that story.
Always,
you know. So
always. You know, and it's funny because you see that the most, like you were saying, you know, as the sport progresses through each and every athlete, they reach a point where it's a fight game, right? So you have a very narrow window where you're in your peak and your prime performance years, and if you get to the levels that Cerrone reached, and he was just shy of the title, I think he fought for it a couple of times. I don't remember
Might
exactly
have,
how
yeah.
many. Yeah, and you start to decline, and I think he's lost 3 in a row, except for I think he came back on his last fight. You start looking for excuses, maybe not excuses. You look for cogs, you know, to go, what is going wrong here? I was the cat daddy here, and now suddenly I'm losing 3 in a row. It's got to be my training.
Right, and that's I mean, and that's the thing, right? It's always when we laugh about it in the corner because we go, when they win, it's them. When they lose, it's us.
Exactly.
You know.
No, 100%, man. That's exactly
But
right.
I think it really, and this is something we touched upon when we first met, was, is it the athlete or is it the martial artist, right? Because the martial artist gets it, the athlete a lot of times doesn't, right? The athlete is looking for the next hack, the next, you know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Like, what's going to make me better? And I like to say the next a shiny object that catches their fancy or their attention. I've had situations and instances where I've had fighters come to me with plenty of experience. I've cornered them, coached them. We've gone 2-0, 3-0. Next thing you know, I'm no longer working with them.
Right.
You know, like, all right, man, whatever. I'm fine with that. That's cool. It's like now I have my weekends with my family.
Right.
You know,
right.
rather than with you that doesn't get it. But with I had the pleasure of cornering Tim Williams, but I really started my cornering career as a coach with Tim Carpenter, who is a very accomplished MMA fighter, fought in Bellator, high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, and all that other stuff. And he's the guy that kind of, I looked at him, and he was my first person that I really helped because we were really good friends. And I go, like, oh, I guess this is how all fighters are, right? Because self-starter, self-motivator, didn't have to tell him much, would just give him a tweak here or there. You know, like for me, cornering him was more about, I'm here with my friend. I want to make him comfortable because when you were cornering Pete Spratt or the other guys you've ever cornered, you know, it's like, depending on your personality, I'm fun. I like to be jovial and all this other stuff. But as the fight gets closer, it just gets more and more serious because we all know that, all right, something extremely dangerous is going to be happening soon. But with Tim, it was really like a good experience for me because I got to see, all right, man, like these are the kinds of fighters I want to work with. I don't want to have to hold anybody's hand.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to have to sit there and comb your hair and tell you you're great. You know, it's like, that's not what I'm good at. You know, like, I'm good at it being honest and, like you did awesome, but you sucked at this and let's keep it moving. And your goals are my goals, but let's not have my want of your wanting to reach your goals. And this is kind of sounding convoluted, but I can't want it more than you. Right. And sometimes with fighters, it feels like you want it more than them because of however their personality is. And that's upside down. If I want it more than you, I can't work with you. Right. I can only match your level. I should never exceed it. And that's not something that I came up with. A buddy of mine, Justin Garcia, he touts that idea. And I heard it. I'm like, yes, you are 100% correct.
No, I love that, and that's probably the title for the episode. To be honest with you, I'm going to take that and use that or some version of that as the title for this episode because that's really amazing, and it's really applicable across the board. You know, whether if you're at the office and you're wanting to excel there, your boss can't want you to excel more than you do. You know, it's applicable everywhere. If you want a good marriage, you know, the wife can't want it
100%,
more
yeah.
than you do. It's got to be an even keel. So
Right. Yeah.
I
She
think
can't love me more than I love her. Yeah. You
right,
know, so
right,
yeah, no, it's definitely something that, and especially look when I have more so like students leave, right? Not guys that are looking to fight or fighters. When I have students leave, it's kind of, you know, like they didn't manage their own expectation,
right,
right? They never had a conversation with me about saying, hey, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I want. I'm like, hey, man, this is who I am. This is how you're going to get treated. If you need something different, talk to me. But otherwise, you know, like if you don't tell me, I don't know. Right.
right.
You know, unless I can't, you know, you're married, right? You
Oh
can't
yeah,
read your wife's mind as much as you probably wish you could. Right. But you're in those instances like, I don't like, how do I handle this? How do I, you know, like, I don't know what the right answer is. I can't be that way with students or fighters. I have to be, all right, man, you know, you're not happy here. I'm not giving you what you need. That was your expectation. I
right.
never said I was going to do all this stuff for you. You built this expectation up in your mind, never had a conversation with me, and we were never able to kind of manage that expectation, you know, what you wanted and what I wanted.
That is, I think that comes with wisdom. I really do because you know there were several instances that I had my own expectations that I assumed someone else shared. And I felt if I did this, then they should do this, and we would work together to accomplish one particular goal. And I'm being very elusive because I'm not trying to drop any names or
Right.
drop
Got
anybody
you.
in the grease or
Uh-huh.
anything. But
We say out here in Philadelphia, throw them under the bus.
we say that here too. So yeah, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. We say the same thing. So I learned after doing that X number of times. You know, I'm pretty dense, so it took probably more than twice. And I learned now I never go into anything without clearly stating expectations and making sure that my expectations matched the expectations of the person that I'm working with.
or we have that conversation where now I can manage them, or you
Sure.
know, if you're telling your expectation as a new guy walking in hey, Marco, I want to be UFC champion. All right, awesome. That's something that I log away and saying, all right, is he doing the things that somebody that claims to want to be a UFC champion is doing?
Sure.
Or is he just, oh, he's coming in twice a week? Well, what you said and what you're doing don't align there, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, no, and I think people need to just in all areas of life, business,
Yes.
marriage, like, hey, what's my expectation of you? And let me express that so that if you're not ready to handle that, we can have that conversation now, and I can either manage your expectation or you can adjust it so that it fits in with what we got going on.
Right. Or you can just shake hands and that'll be it. I mean, that's fine, you know?
I've had that situation where like literally students, like, you know, in jiu-jitsu, getting your blue belt's a pretty big deal.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Guy walked in the next day and quit, right? Because he was like X, Y, and Z, and this isn't what the school is doing for me, and blah, blah, blah. And he asked me, he's like, well, do you have a rebuttal? And I go, no. I go, I'm not gonna rebut anything you're saying. You've already come to this conclusion without talking to me ahead of time. I
Mhm.
was like, man, thanks for coming in. Keep your blue belt. You earned it. Congratulations. It's a pleasure seeing you. The door doesn't shut. Anytime you want to come back, please feel free.
Right on, yeah.
Yeah, you know, like, and what I think shocked him was me giving him his power that he was trying to assert on me. I was like, hey, man, you know what? I'm going to give you what you're looking for.
Right.
Right. I'm not going to try and defend the way I teach, the way I coach, the way, you know, to somebody that's at no point in his time here did he say, hey, you know, can we do this? Or this is what I want to work on, or this is what you know, don't come to me with your expectations and then be upset that I haven't worked on them when we didn't clearly outline them and set them up.
Right.
You know, so then I'm like, all right, dude, thanks for coming, man. I appreciate you being a man at least and doing it face to face.
Send me a
And us-
text. I'm
yeah.
not going to be in. Yeah.
Yeah, right. No, but it's something that you learn, martial artist, business, parent, you know, whatever it is, that sometimes, you know, giving people what they want is, I'm not going to say the best revenge, but it's like, I think he wanted me to defend myself so that he would have a little bit of the power there where I'm like, nah, man. All right. This is what you believe. Go for it. because I believe differently, and I don't need to defend my beliefs to you.
Right.
This isn't how this relationship works. This is not. I sometimes will tell people this is when Muammar Gaddafi was running Libya. I said this place is there's a Muammar Gaddafi reference. This place is as much of a democracy as Libya is.
Yeah.
You know, like no, like I'm going to listen to people. I'm going to take what they have to say. And if they're making a strong enough argument, I will change my opinion. But ultimately, it all falls back on me.
And again, just to wrap all that up, it all falls back on communication, and just again expressing your expectations. It's right out of the gate, because you can't go into something, you know. And I'm harping on this because I'm going into it looks like I'm going into a business venture with a couple of other guys on a media company, and we
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
I'm in, whatever it is.
And we each bring something to the table, but we also each have our own independent businesses. So we're like, well, what do we do here? You know, what if I land a client here for Readily Random, and do we have to push that under the umbrella of the new company? What are we doing there? And we're having these discussions, some of which are quite awkward, right? But they need to be had. So
better now than later, when, you know, one guy expects, well, part of that money's mine.
Right.
And you're like, no, this is mine. And then that's an awkward conversation. Like, hey, this is outlined in our operating agreement.
Exactly.
I know what an operating agreement is.
Oh, good job.
So this is outlined in the operating agreement, and we've all agreed that this is how we're going to divvy up the pie. And, you know, so, because then they could always come back and say, well, I didn't understand this. So, well, great. Look at the black and white on the paper and understand it better.
Exactly. You know? Exactly. So, all right, that was all seriousness stuff. Let's go. Let's stop the moral story and get back to the fight game.
Yes.
Take us behind the scenes, if you don't mind. Take us behind the scenes of last weekend's fight, where Tim Williams he fought somebody that I can't even remember their name. Eric, what's his name?
Eric Anders.
Eric Anders, that's right. And the UFC is billing this guy as like the next wheel. I mean, he is just their golden boy. All the promotion, they had half-hour specials on this guy, and I'm like, wow, this is an uphill battle for Mr. Williams, because he's not even getting any press. They just expect this guy to run over him, and that did not happen.
No, it didn't happen. Thankfully, even the Vegas betting lines were, you know, like Tim was the biggest underdog on the card. He definitely didn't fight like a giant underdog.
No, he didn't.
All that other stuff. So yeah, from Philly to Omaha, Nebraska, drive to Lincoln, right? An hour, beautiful country, you know, cornfields and all that stuff that you'd imagine, you know, from Middle America. And we get, you know, you just know that a fight's going on. Like we get to the hotel and I run into a legend of, you know, if you're really deep into mixed martial arts and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we ran into Waleed Ismail, right? Who's this Brazilian, fought in Pride, keeps calling Renzo Gracie out like he wants to fight Renzo, right? Like, and I ran into him in the parking lot, and I was so geeked. Like, I don't get geeked out on any of these guys, right?
Yeah.
I got geeked out on him because I have a picture from 1999 on my phone with me, him, and a buddy of mine in Brazil.
That's amazing.
Right? And I go, Waleed, I have a picture, and we took another one, and, you know, like all that other stuff. So I was like, oh man, this is already starting off great.
Yeah.
You know, great. You know, like I see one of these guys that is like an icon of the deeply initiated. Anyway, let's get to what happens when you're getting ready to go to your fight, right? So there's a call time, right? It's like, it's almost like the movies or whatever for actors. And they tell us, you have to meet us in the hotel lobby at 6:30. There's a kind of a meeting room. We get all of our credentials. That's when I got that cool Minority Report ID where they probably have pictures of me now. Anyway, so then, you know, you jump on a bus with you jump on the bus, and they make sure to put you on a bus that your opponent is not on.
Oh,
right. So it
smart,
doesn't get, so you're not Conor McGregor and somebody throws a dolly through your window and all that other stuff. And you drive to the venue, it's like, 10 minutes, and, you know, you could already start feeling it's not that it's tense, but you're like, all right, it's getting serious. Like they're going over to the venue, and, you know, people are taking pictures, they're Instagram Live. And then we get to go through security, get to the dressing room. Right. And I'm wearing some gear now, but the UFC and Reebok, like, I know it sucks for the fighters,
yeah,
but for the corners, like I walk away with a new wardrobe every time I go to the UFC. You know, it's great for me. So Reebok, thank you for the UFC deal. I appreciate
And
it.
what are the fighter kits? Is that what they call them?
Yeah, the fighter kits, but you also get a swag bag.
Oh,
Right?
really? Okay.
Of,
All
of
right.
stuff that's not branded for your fighter, which is like super high quality. I have a pair of Reebok CrossFit sneakers that they give you. It's like it's insane.
Nice.
Yeah. So we walk into the corner, well, not the corner, but in the dressing room, and this was a shared dressing room. So Tim's on the, on the main card, but he's not at a level with the UFC where he has his own dressing room.
Right.
And all of your stuff is laid out, your name tag, UFC and Marco Perazzo. And I'm like, man, that's pretty neat that the UFC logo and my name are on the same, piece of paper.
Right on.
We get dressed in there, and there's a bunch of different fighters. But going back, right, we had already been to the arena. So one of the things that Tim likes to do is he likes to go spend a little time in the cage before his fight, right? Just to kind of, I think, get a feel for the arena, for us to kind of know, all right, well, this is where we're going to be. This is where we're going to go up.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, Mickey Gall was in there with us, right? So what I will say as an aside about Mickey Gall is he had his coaches in there. What he did in that fight, that head outside single,
yes,
the back
yes,
take,
yes,
I watched him do that for 25 minutes with his coaches when we were in the cage, maybe less, but it was the one grappling scenario that he was drilling, that same takedown to that same back take to the rear naked choke, which was pretty amazing, because George Sullivan's a very, like he's got a lot of fights on.
Yeah.
He's no spring chicken to fighting. So that was super neat. So going back to, we were in the cage with Tim, just a couple tweaks. His head coach, Jimmy Morrison, is in there with him, and I'm on the outside kind of just tweaking one or two things, right? Because at this point, teaching him anything new is lost and wasted, right? It's just way too late for new information.
It's nothing more than a distraction, really.
100%. He's also in there with his Muay Thai coach, Andy Russell. And his Muay Thai coach, Andy, has a very complex system. And Tim, I'm not going to say Tim is new to him, but Tim is really grasping this system that Andy kind of shows. And for me, I've been around striking for a while, but Andy has some ideas that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about, and how they do it, and how, just a slight angle change opens up a whole different world for what he does. It's almost, it's one of the few times I've seen a striking coach approach MMA Muay Thai like a jiu-jitsu coach does. Like extremely, not just power and punch and kick and knee.
Right.
It's like, these are your angles. This is how you make a miss, and all that other stuff. So Andy's in there holding pads for him, blah, blah, blah. So then we go back to the hotel, and then we're back in the corner, say, like we're back at where all the fighters are. We're just hanging out, right? He's going to do his warm up. We're getting dressed in there. And the nice thing with the UFC is, exactly what time you're going on. So we can, this is what time he's going to warm up. This is what time he's going to work on his grappling. He's going to work on his striking with Andy. He's going to drink, whatever water they allow you to drink. He's going to, to deal with the Nebraska Athletic Commission, with the commissioners not the commissioners, but the guys that work behind the scenes and all that other stuff. So there's a whirlwind of activity, a whirlwind of people, but all very, I'm not even going to say it's chaos, but it's very organized in what could be an unbelievably disorganized kind of thing.
Sure.
Then they call you out, right? And like, okay, Tim, you're up. And we're all right. Where's the bucket? We got to get mouthpiece. Boom. We're walking. Last thing you want is not have the mouthpiece.
Right.
Here come the amateurs. And then, you walk out there, and at that point, it's all about Tim, right? And have we done enough? And will he be able to do enough to get this victory? And then, go in, you do the fighters' hugs, and then the fight starts, man. It's like it's this thrilling experience.
Yeah, I've never cornered a UFC fight, although that was like a dream of mine at one time. But I can only relate it back to cornering Pete in more than one fight. He and I used to fight together. So we came up, we knew each other before martial arts even, and we don't even know where we knew each other from, because we went to separate schools back home, or same town. But anyway, Gotcha. So the difference between me and Pete is that he's an athlete and I'm not. So he was able to
If you're
really
gonna tee these up for me, I'm not going to bother to hit them. Okay.
Well, and too, Margo. Back when we fought, I was a buck 55. I fought at 155 at 6'4", and so I was really
Man, that's lean and
oh
long right there.
Lord, it was so skinny, and my grappling was always very subpar. I was always susceptible to a triangle choke. That's how I lost the 3 fights that I lost. I lost all 3 of them to triangle choke. You would think that I figured out how to get out of it, but I still hadn't. And
First time, shame on me.
yeah, exactly. So but it was intimidating. Here, I'll tell you a little backstory. The first fight that I was ever in was against a guy that it was one of Guy Mezger and Trey Telligman's students, right?
Oh, so out of the Lions Den.
Out of the Lions Den, and they were gods to me. I mean, literal gods, right? I mean, I'd watched them in Pancrase. Trey, he's got the chest thing going on. I got a chest thing going on from a birth defect, and I was like, I always related to him because he had a big heart, and I always just wanted to be, Trey was massive.
Right. Big heart that you could almost see.
Nearly, yes, yeah. I'm teeing him up, and so we get to the venue, which was just a boys' club, I think it was. It was either a boys' club or just like a local gym in McKinney, Texas. And we get there, and I'm fighting one of their students. And a friend of mine, Eric, he was my trainer for this particular fight. And it was a pancration type fight, open-handed slap fight because that's all they had in Texas. And I look over in the corner, and there's Guy Mezger and Trey Telligman and some dude with official Pancrase shin guards on. And I'm like, what the hell what am I doing? Where am I? So, I was scared to death and to just be in awe of these 2 guys. And needless to say, as soon as I went to the ground, actually, I had him in a guillotine, but I didn't know where to put my hips or how to place my hips. So all I had was an arm guillotine and like a scissor lock trying to pull his head off. And of course, he knew how to defend it.
Basically holding his head.
Yeah, let's just say that. Let's just call it what it is. I was holding his head. And so they stand us up, and I go down, and I should have kept it up top because I could stand up was my gig back then, and I didn't. I thought I'd be cool because the UFC was cool, and I took him down, and I was down there for all of 2 seconds, and I still remember hearing Guy in my ear going, "All right, pull his head down," and just giving the instructions, and I'm just in awe, and I'm like, "Oh my God, this is so,"
Right.
And so I tap out, and. And I never learned. That was I tapped out 2 more times to a guillotine in other fights, and not guillotine. I'm sorry, a triangle choke. And so that was a lot of fun.
Which is that the Lions Den guy doing a triangle choke is kind of surprising because you don't expect them to be on their back. Like if you would have said a heel hook, a knee bar, or something like that, that would have felt a little more right, But that's super interesting because they were the guys that were kind of the first. In the United States, anyway, the first true mixed martial artists that were doing kickboxing and grappling. I'm not going to say jiu-jitsu, but they were doing, some form of grappling where like what the hell is that? What is that leg move that Ken Shamrock just did to Pat Smith? Like, what is that?
Yeah.
Like heel hooks and all this other stuff. And, there's a big argument about the stuff in Japan and the early Pancrase stuff, if that was premeditated or not. But regardless, it was, those guys were super tough,
Oh yeah, most definitely. And I remember watching the original Pancrase fights back in the day, and I know some of it was a work, or predetermined, but I firmly believe that
my understanding is the Japanese fan has no problem with a card of some worked fights and some real fights.
Yep.
So and that if that's fine for them, like what do I care?
Yeah, as long as they're entertained, you know what I mean. Yeah. The Japanese crowd is completely different. I don't want to get into the psychology of the Japanese crowds versus the American crowds, but they are totally different than an American crowd. You can hear a pin drop in the middle of a fight in Japan. But, over here, everybody's like, kick his ass, sea bass,
right,
that kind of crap. So,
so going back to Tim's fight. So we're, we're in the corner and Tim's executing the game plan, right? He's executing, he's keeping his distance. Eric Anders, our first meeting that we had when he signed when he asked us what we thought of him signing on for this fight was, this guy hurts people with his left hand, and he's going to be the best athlete you've ever fought.
Yeah.
He was a starting middle linebacker for the University of Alabama, right? And I believe he won a national championship or 2.
Mm-hmm.
Bounced around the NFL, maybe the CFL and all this other stuff. Never caught on. But man, the guy was at the top level of college athletics, man.
Mm-hmm.
There's something to be said for that. And that was something that we impressed upon Tim. Tim's an amazing athlete in his own right, but never as organized as a guy like Eric Anders. But from a stand-up perspective, Tim did exactly what especially his coach, Andy Russell, asked him. I'm not going to say exactly, but he did mostly everything that we wanted. He did get caught, but everybody gets caught. Everybody gets hit.
Sure.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like from the feet. Clearly, Tim won that first round.
Oh
right?
yeah, 100%.
There's no doubt in anybody's mind.
I was blown away.
Yeah, and to see Eric Anders get taken down, because he had not been taken down in the UFC up until that point. From what I know, you know what? We got knocked down by Machida. Machida caught him with a kick that swept his foot out from under him. So it was not as much like a technical takedown as Tim did. So pressed up against the cage, Tim was able to work, and and he and I had worked a lot on clinching. Right, and clinching and getting double underhooks and working your takedowns from that perspective. And man, big takedown and mounts him, takes his back, and the round's over. Right, but all right, that's Tim's. There's no doubt. I don't care. 3 blind mice can judge that fight and tell you that Tim Williams won that first round.
Adelaide Bird would tell you that Tim won that first round. I'm not editing that. I'll tell you that.
I don't even know who that is. So. I don't know.
You really don't know who that is? Or you just said that for your few? Oh, it's a judge that she judges the fights just so backwards.
And she does a lot of boxing, right?
Yes, and she does boxing too. Yes. And I'm like, what fight is she watching?
Yeah.
So anyways.
So second round rolls around, and I have the benefit of having rewatched the fight, but also looking at the fight metric to kind of have some information just for my own personal kind of education. And Eric was a lot more active in the second round than Tim was, right? And our thought was after the second round, not that he didn't beat Tim up,
no,
you know what I'm saying? But he was the more active fighter. He landed more, so forth and so on. So it's like, all right, now it's 1-1. It's a tie fight. Whoever wins the third round wins the fight. So third round rolls around. Pretty even for the first minute. Tim gets dropped with a left hand, but doesn't get hurt from it. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like a flash
knockdown
and gets up. At that point, my mind as a coach is he's losing this fight now because he's losing this round. If this is a fight we're going to lose if it stays even the rest of the time. And it pretty much was an even fight after that. The last 15 to 20 seconds, Tim goes for a takedown, trying to even up the score with the judges, gets shoved to the ground, or good defense. Because in the middle of the cage, Eric Anders does a beautiful job of stopping takedowns, right? But against the cage, he got taken down twice, right? So you could see like whoever's scouting him for the next one, call me, press him, take him down against the cage. If you think your jiu-jitsu is better than his. Anyway, and there's 20 seconds left in the fight, and I'm screaming, get up, and Tim gets up. And if you watch the fight, you could argue that that's already made knockout of the year. It was an unbelievably unprecedented knockout because of the new rule set, whereas before that would have been a disqualification. I'm not making that argument at all. I'm just saying that in 2017, Eric Anders gets disqualified under the new rules, which we were fully made aware of.
Sure.
Right? We knew what the rules were. Man, clean knockout. And at that point, my heart drops because I'm seeing my friend get kicked. Right? I mean, it was just a brutal kick.
Sure.
Fight's over. It was like one of those things where it's like we're in it, and then just like everybody who follows MMA, you're in it till you're not. And
right,
at that point he wasn't. And I think if you look at the fight metric, if you watch the fight with the exception of the last 20 seconds, right, he did not look like the underdog or the B side of that fight.
Right.
He looked like a guy that should, could, and would be in this fight for 14 and a half minutes.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I couldn't believe the line after watching him fight. It for one, I don't know that I've seen a line that spread out in a long, long time. I can't even I tried to think of the last time I saw a spread that was that wide. And I was like, wow, this is going to be a little rough. I don't know if I want to talk to Marco next week or not. Cause I mean, if this guy gets crushed, I mean, who wants to talk to him?
Right.
No, I'm just kidding. But, all fighters get crushed at some point, folks.
I mean and there's very few undefeated fighters in our sport.
Yeah. So, but then when he fought, I was blown away, especially that first round. He definitely clearly 100% won that first round. Second round, I agree 100%. You know, Eric came to life and he was all over the place, and he was putting his hands on him. And it seemed like there was some confusion there in that third round when Eric threw the kick, because didn't he look to the ref and then come back and then throw the kick?
So I'd have to really look at that. I know one of my students said that Anders is saying, like, in the cage, complete gentleman, came up to all of us, said Tim was a great fighter, like, Tim's a hell of a fighter and all this other stuff, but his kind of Instagram persona is your boy, and he's got to sell himself. I completely get it, man. This is a period of entertaining MMA, not kind of fight MMA. And he could fight, but he understands that he needs to kind of entertain the crowd. Having said that, he's had said that he planned this, and this is what he was, not that he planned it, but it was like he knew what he was doing, where some people were claiming that kick started when 4 points were on the floor, which is a DQ if it lands when 4 points.
I agree. I had to go back and watch it multiple times, and from the different angles that they were showing it before I was sold on the fact that it was a legal kick. I didn't think it was legal, and it definitely started illegal.
Right. So, I mean, he could say whatever he wants, but I would have a tough time. That's not something, you're not practicing that at home.
No,
you know, and all that. He did it a couple times. Tim got up because we called for him to get up.
Right.
And after, when he, and Tim is, like I told you, how intense of a guy. My wife got mad at me for making fun of Tim on the last podcast we were on together. She's like, "Are you sure he's not mad at you?" I go, "I don't know. Let me check." Now you're making me wonder. Anyway, so for as intense and intimidating as his look is how nice that he is, right?
Right.
After the fight, he's apologizing to us for the loss. And we're like, dude, please don't ever. You know what I'm saying? Like, you basically just got hit in the head with a Louisville slugger. You don't have to apologize for anything. But Tim, my concern was something I said caused this, right? Because I'm like, not that, man, you do as much as you want. And at the end of the day, Tim makes a decision on what he's going to do behind that chain link fence. He said to us, he's like, I thought I was losing too, and I felt like I needed to get up. So it made me feel better from that standpoint of a coach, that I didn't fail him, that, all right, we were trying to win. Because look, man, I know a guy that just got cut from the UFC.
Yeah.
A guy I used to corner, and it's like, if you're not out there performing, if you're not out there trying to win fights, because he could have rode it out on his back and lost a decision, which he probably would have lost.
Right.
Because if he loses that round, which we believed he was losing, then laying on his back doesn't do anything for him. And who's going to snatch up a submission with 20 seconds left? Right. Those days are gone. So it was good to hear that he let me off the hook a little bit.
Right.
Because I was very adamant about when he got dropped in that round, that, man, something drastic has to happen for him to get that back. But for him to apologize, so he's just that dude. And man, see, he had to get stitches, and he was a bit, I'm not going to say loopy, but he wasn't clear. You know what I'm saying?
No,
like, I'm not having. Yeah.
He got hit hard.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I'm looking at this check, and I'm looking at what just happened, and I go, man, you might feel worse after you look at the check.
I laugh, but it's not funny, but it is funny. The way you're telling it's funny, but the reality of it's not funny at all.
No, and he's clearly fighting because he loves fighting, and he's passionate, and he wants to be the best fighter he can be, and his martial arts journey is taking him, thankfully, through the highest level of fighting.
Yeah.
But man, it just sucks because it wouldn't suck, like it sucks to say, right? But how would I feel had he lost the decision? I don't know. I mean, I know I feel terrible now because of the way he lost, because it was such a tight fight, but it is what it is. But going to Eric Anders, I think the UFC is building this guy up, and this isn't a case of spilt milk and all this other stuff, but I think he is who he is. You know, like having watched a bunch of his fights, I've not seen a lot of growth out of him as a fighter. But maybe that's just me because I'm looking at my guy.
Right.
But you know, his corner was, you look lethargic. No, he made you look lethargic. You weren't lethargic. Like give your opponent across the cage some credits. Like, hey man, you know, Tim's game plan worked for 14 minutes and 40 seconds.
Right.
You know, and Tim was doing from a striking standpoint, trying to stay away from that left hand, keeping his distance, and then getting those takedowns against the cage. You know, the takedowns that were stuffed, you know, and again, for anybody that fights him next, you're probably not going to take him down in the middle of the cage unless you're a high level, you know, wrestler, like somebody like Daniel Cormier or who's the Cuban guy? I can't think of his name right now. You know what I'm talking about.
Romero.
Romero. He'd blow on you and knock you over with a takedown.
Yeah.
You know? So unless you're that guy, I mean, his hips are that good that in the middle of the cage, you're going to have a tough time getting him down. But against the cage, his hips are compromised.
Right.
Yeah,
And that goes back to his football. I mean, the wide open area, being a linebacker, he understands, you know, the leverage in that type of position, and that's what prevents the takedowns in an open area. But as a football player, you put your backside on a wall, and you're not as skilled in maintaining your positioning or your leverage.
And I was surprised because I know how strong Tim is, but I was just under the assumption that Eric was going to be bigger and stronger. And he didn't look to be either. He looked to be bigger. He did not look to be stronger.
Right. And that's something that we've seen many, many times in the UFC. We have these athletes, right? And the evolution of the sport has shown it time and time again because the level of athlete seems to increase every 5 years. We'll just say 5 years for a random number. And their athleticism carries them only so far. And then once they reach the peak of their athleticism and their opponent's athleticism starts to match it and their opponent's skill sets are at the next level, that's when we see all these cat daddy athletes start tumbling down the mountain.
Right. And especially if you're like a Yoel Romero is a different guy. A Tyron Woodley is a different guy because they are athletes, but in a combat sport.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. You know, so that's a different, but you know, Eric Anders isn't, and I'm not, man, he might have a high upside. Again, maybe this is spilled milk on my part, but you know, he's coming late to this game. This is option 2 for him.
Right.
If you're Eric Anders, do you want to fight and win a 50 grand bonus or make minimum in the NFL?
You still want to make minimum in the NFL.
Yeah, 100%. Right. So he doesn't have the time in that a lot of these other guys that have in. Can he make the improvements? Sure. But looking at his fights, I don't see, and maybe this will start a Twitter war with Eric Anders.
Oh, that'd be great.
Awesome.
Look at, I'm going to put it out there.
You know what I'm going to do? And I'm just going to ignore it. I'm going to take the high road. I'm just like, who are you? Oh, you're that guy? I never heard of you.
Marco Perazzo talks shit today on the podcast. This is so awesome.
No, but I mean, like, I have a lot of respect for him.
Right.
But if you know, whoever fights him next, I think you've seen ways that he was exposed in this fight against Tim Williams.
Sure.
If you're on the floor and you go to get up, 4 points. Just get up with 4 points, and he won't knock you out. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that's
what got me is I watched him too. When he got up, he technically got up. He executed the proper standing up from the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu lineage. He everything was right the way he did.
We couldn't be any more proud.
Exactly. You know? Exactly.
Right.
It's
but there's actually I've known for a lot of years. I have a lot of respect for, and I won't throw his name under the bus, but he posted something on Facebook saying, that's the reason why you need to gauge your distance better when you're doing a technical stand-up, right? You're using Tim's fight as an example.
Right.
The distance was gauged wrong. And you know, I'm MFing and, you know, like livid. And I'm like, no, not today. You know, and I'm like, I mean, he's entitled to his opinion or whatever. But what he fails to realize is, or maybe he does realize and he just doesn't care and he's using it as a sounding board, is that down in distance, bro. Like you can't, like if he gauges the distance, then what happens is the time runs out and he loses.
Right.
So
right.
he's making a value judgment right there. What's more important, getting up safely or getting up quickly. And at
Mhm.
that point, it's getting up quickly so that you have the opportunity in those last 20 seconds to win the
Yeah, to do
fight.
something. Yeah.
Right. And,
Yeah.
and that's why I was just like, man, I was so like, I never get mad when anybody posts anything on Facebook, but I was like, oh, I hate you right now. I don't hate him, but I'm like, man, I'm just cursing him up and down. And I'm like, dang it. Like, why'd you have to post that?
We'll just stress the right now. I hate
Yeah,
you
yeah,
right
yeah.
now. It's not long term, but
Right.
I'm mad right now. So, well, Marco, I don't want to keep you any longer, man. This went longer than I anticipated. Anyhow, I love the conversation, and I love how we took it. We tied it back into some business principles and some life principles.
Yeah. I think those, like, I mean, and we could talk about business another time. There's my, hey, have me back on, please.
Yeah, I picked up on that. Thanks. So subtle, so subtle.
Well, if I don't ask, how am I going to get back on?
Exactly.
Right. But these martial arts experiences, right, are wasted if they're only used in the martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like everything that you learned in Kempo, everything that you gained from losing those 3 fights by the same move. And someday I'll come out to Texas and help you with that.
Thank you.
Okay?
I appreciate it.
But like even having the strength of character to talk about that and say, hey man, you know what, this is, man, you've grown as a person, and don't take the lessons learned and not apply them to other areas of your life. If there's anything the martial arts can do for us, is that strength should and must carry over into every other area of our life.
Beautiful. That sums it up right there. So, hey, Marco, if you would, tell us your contact information, your Twitter, your Instagram, your Facebook, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so I'm on my own Facebook, personally, Marco Perazzo, if anybody wants to get in contact with me. And then most of my other stuff is Team NJMA, TEAM NJMA, on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and that's where I kind of run all of the social media for my school, and make announcements about being on podcasts and that kind of stuff. And yeah, here I am.
And that's NJ as in New Jersey.
Come on,
He said, "Come on,
come on, man. Yeah, you look. This whole time you're acting like we like each other, and you got to come with that. But yes, New Jersey or New Jersey. Even though I born, raised, and continue to live in Philadelphia, I commute to South Jersey to run my business.
That's awesome. All right, Marco, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Have yourself a great Saturday. Hang on, we'll talk this a bit more and go from there. Thanks, guys.